Defier Performance loves supercharging.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the show.
Hey guys, John from Defier Performance. Welcome to the Mad Scientist Corner. Today we're going to talk about ways we build horsepower. There are several different methods that we use in the performance industry: supercharging, turbocharging, and nitrous oxide. All of these are methods to feed air and fuel into the engine in a higher rate than what the engine can pull in on its own. The engine in itself is an air pump. It's pulling air in, it's compressing it, it's combusting it, and it's pushing it back out. The way to get more power in an engine is to increase that efficiency of the in, out, and burn. One of the ways to do that, and the first thing we're going to touch on, is going to be a supercharger. There's many different types of superchargers. What separates a supercharger from a turbocharger is a belt drive. If it has a belt on it, it is a supercharger. It doesn't matter if it looks like a turbo, it is still a supercharger. It takes the engine's RPM and it spins a compressor, and that compressor feeds more air into the engine than the air can naturally pull in through vacuum. That's simple. You're going to see it on most manufacturers when they have performance vehicles. It's the easiest way to package a performance part. There are ways to control a supercharger, just like there are with nitrous and turbos. We use a bypass valve. It's a device pretty much like this, and it opens and closes based on electronic input or vacuum input. When it's open, it allows that air to actually circulate so the supercharger does not build boost. Once this valve closes, though, it'll build boost, it'll increase the power of the motor. ProCharge and Vortec use the same type of device, but it's a much smaller unit. It's usually hidden in the intake tract somewhere, very similar to the turbochargers. So I'm not going to go over the ProCharger and the Vortec setups right now. We're going to skip right forward to the turbocharger. A turbocharger is unlike a supercharger in the fact that it does build the same boost, but the way it does it is completely different. It uses the exhaust system to actually spin a turbine, and that in turn spins another impeller that produces the actual boost. A couple of different things that have to be added in with a turbocharger that aren't required on a supercharger. Number one is the wastegate. What the wastegate does is it tells the turbo whether or not you want boost. They can be controlled by vacuum or they can be controlled electronically. If they're controlled by vacuum, they'll look very similar to this. This is the exhaust pipe off of a turbocharged Hemi. This bolts up to the catalytic converter, and the turbocharger bolts here. This portion of it is your wastegate. It has a little fitting on it. It is controlled by vacuum. The thing with a wastegate is they have the ability to control on the top side and the bottom side. So once the thing starts making boost, the boost actually gets applied to the wastegate and helps hold the wastegate closed so that it can build more boost. These can be, like I said, controlled by vacuum or electronic. Electronic is the best way to do it because you have full control over it. One of the side effects, though, of turbochargers is because they are driven by exhaust gas, sometimes it's difficult to actually control the amount of boost, or once you let off the throttle, the amount of boost coming into the engine is so high that that quick release of throttle snaps the throttle closed, but the thing's still making boost. The turbo is still making 20 pounds. It's trying to push through that throttle body. So the other half of a turbocharger kit is the actual blow-off valve. And what this does is it goes in the intake tract, and it also is controlled by vacuum. And what it does is it's actually got a section here that vents to the atmosphere. So when it sees vacuum and not boost, which is what's caused by closing the throttle, this will instantly open up and blow off that extra boost that's not going to be able to get into the engine because the throttle body is closed. These are what you hear on turbocharged cars when you let off the throttle. That high-pitched whistle or that rushing noise that comes out. That's coming from this device right here, all right? It's usually in your intake tract, goes directly up to your throttle body like yay. It's probably one of the most effective ways to vent off that pressure. And you can sometimes see like cars that have really high horsepower numbers and really high amounts of boost, they will have more than one of these to allow it to vent off pressure. You get past 30 PSI of boost, you're gonna want 2 of these on here to get that pressure vented out quicker. Thanks to Alwayz Angry and his ability to make me look like I know what I'm talking about. Our next power adder that we've been talking about today is actually going to be nitrous oxide. So they call it a baby bottle. It's kind of a cheater method to build horsepower. It's the cheapest way to do it, but it's also the most dangerous. So that's something you have to keep in mind when you're doing this. Nitrous is something that you can even add on top of a supercharger or a turbocharger. When you have a dual power adder vehicle, you'll oftentimes will see somebody running 8 or 9 pounds of boost and then an additional 250 shot of nitrous oxide just for the hell of it. Nitrous oxide is a gas that has a lot of oxygen in it. So what that does is it increases that airflow that's in the engine by having available oxygen to burn. Some nitrous kits are dry kits. What that means is there's not enough nitrous going in to affect the actual fuel burn. So it's just going to be increasing a little bit. Anywhere from 50 to 75 horsepower, it's typically a dry kit. The second setup is the wet kit. Wet kit will have both nitrous and fuel going into the engine because the engine can't produce enough fuel on its own to keep up with the amount of nitrous. Several ways to do it. You'll often see an arming switch, purge button, things of that nature, and you'll see a plate. This plate will have lines going to it. It'll have little jets in here so you can adjust the amount of fuel and nitrous that are going in, and you can get anywhere from 150 to 5,000 horsepower with the right nitrous kit. They also have a direct port fogger kit, which will put a nozzle at each individual cylinder and spray directly. This has to go all the way through the intake manifold, and it sometimes will disperse evenly, sometimes it won't. Depends on the efficiency of the engine. The biggest risk with nitrous oxide, unlike with supercharging and turbocharging, is it can be hard to control. There are a lot of computer-aided devices, stepped programs, things of that nature to kind of control nitrous oxide. It is a very viable power adder. It makes a lot of horsepower, but nitrous has a tendency of backfiring. And when it does, it can be disastrous. What happens is that nitrous and fuel gets into that intake manifold, and if the timing is off just a little teeny tiny bit, it'll actually explode in the intake. It can blow intakes off, it can blow heads off. I've seen it do some pretty wild stuff. So kind of to sum everything up here, these are all different methods of creating horsepower. If you're looking for more power, I'm hoping I'm giving you enough information here so you can do a little bit of startup research and decide which method is going to be best for you. All right? Thanks for tuning in to the Mad Scientist Corner, and we'll see you next time.